Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to this talk this afternoon by Caroline Fukushima. What I'll start by doing is a brief introduction, and then we'll get on with the talk, and then hopefully some Q&A, both here and online. So I'll say a few words about Carol. So Carol is a postdoctoral researcher at the Natural History Museum, the University of Helsinki in Finland. She's been working on the ecology, behavior, natural history of arachnids since her undergraduate degree in Brazil. More recently, Carol has become interested in the wildlife trade, mostly around live tarantulas and the impact of this trade on wildlife, on wild populations of these animals, as well as interested in understanding what interventions can be put in place to curb unsustainable and illegal trade. Carol is a member of the IUCN Spider and Scorpion Specialist Group, as well as a member of Support Women in Arachnology, which is a group of women who come together to support each other, have a better representation of women in the field of arachnology, and also document some of the gender biases that impact the field. So without further ado, take it away, Carol.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for being here on a Monday. So I know it's hard, but thank you very much. Thank you, Diogo, for the presentation, and thank you, ICCS and Martin, Oxford Martin School, for having me here in the person of EJ and the whole group. I thank you very much for the hospitality. So it's very nice to be here, and I'm very happy for having the opportunity of talking about the spiders that I love so much. I hope nobody here is arachnophobic, because I cannot avoid to show you some pictures, but I promise you no videos, no live specimens here, so it's just pictures. And well, I will start to talk about the project. As Diogo mentioned, it was my postdoc project in the Finnish Museum of Natural History, but I'm Brazilian. And I will tell you a little bit about my history, just to understand the context behind this research. So I studied at University of São Paulo in Brazil, and I work at the Instituto Butantan. It's a very famous institute about researching venom animals, especially. And I worked mostly in the field work, like collecting, identifying, and study the evolution of arachnids, especially in tarantulas. So my work was basically field work and going to the microscope and look at these animals. But then I moved to Finland in 2018, and I started to work with this group, this big group of Pedro Cardoso, a Portuguese researcher in Finland. And it's a broad group, like international people working with conservation, artificial intelligence, caves, biogeography, ecology. So it's a big and diverse group. And then here I am speaking, like here in Oxford Martin School, and hosted by ICCS and Diogo and EJ. So talking about a little bit, a bit of my work. So this is a question. I want to start with this question because I heard this question, I think, my whole life. Like, why tarantulas? Why do you like spiders? Why? Like, there's so many other things that could be nicer, like pandas or turtles or maybe, I don't know, dolphins. But why tarantulas? I think this is the best answer that I can do. Like, well, or I can give to you. They are gorgeous. Like, I know I'm biased, but still, like, they are beautiful. They are colored. They can be very big, they can be very small. They can live in burrows or inside bromeliads or under the bark of the trees. They can have patterns, they can have these brilliant coloration. So they are amazing animals, and they are underestimated by people, that many times they have biased opinions about what they can do or what they can not do. So I've heard many questions during my life, like, oh, how many meters a spider can like jump to bite you? Like, no, people. So these kind of questions are very interesting, and we start a conversation about these animals, and then at the end, I think people started to have a less biased, or maybe started to like these animals. But when I started to work with taxonomy almost 20 years ago, of course, some questions related to illegal wildlife trade permeated my research. And that's why I started to work with wildlife trade when I moved to Finland, because it was something that was bothering me a lot doing my taxonomical work. Maybe if you have an idea about this, if we have some taxonomists here, you may know that what I'm talking about, like people describing species and putting in illegal trade and so on. So it's important to highlight some side effects of the trade when it's illegal and when it's unsustainable. So for example, we have the illegal trade influences scientific decisions. And I can give you an example of one of my recent works when we describe it as a male of a species, and we decided not to disclose the location where we collected because we were afraid that people exploit this small population for commerce. And the fun fact, not so fun, after I think 2 or 3 days of the release of this publication, we were tracking some websites and we saw the species of these species being traded. And this is the value. This is 250 euros for one spiderling, for one baby spider, that they are very fragile and very difficult to take care. So it's kind of a lot of money. So you can imagine if a female can put an egg sac with, I don't know, 50, 60, sometimes some species 500, how many money people are doing with these animals. So this is very important to highlight. Second thing, for example, I'm using the spider trade to illustrate this, is the possibility of creating invasive species. Again, we have these Mexican species that somehow ended up creating a very well-established population in Florida because of pet trade. So we don't know if it was like an accidental release or people just wanted to get rid of the animals and put in some park or something, but now we have invasive species in Florida. Another point that's very important to highlight is the high mortality rate for the species in the trade. So, for example, they conceal these spiders in very small boxes, and half of the population of a place, it's put inside the luggage easily. And then at the end, when they are seizure or they, I don't know, go to the place that they want to sell these animals, half of these animals are dead. Another thing that's very important, that the wildlife trade, when it's, again, done unsustainable or in an unsustainable or illegal way, it can contribute to habitat destruction and the loss of many species associated with that species that is the target. This is another example using tarantulas. We have this one that lives inside bromeliads. So for in a place, like a remote place in Brazil, so people that wanted to have these animals, they collect the whole plant. And inside the whole plant, you can have, of course, frogs, insects, and the plant itself is something that, well, it's dead after the collection. So although the target is the tarantula, of course, other species and other species are being harmed with this type of activity. And of course, the most obvious is the loss of biodiversity and services that the species can provide. For example, for spiders, we can say that spiders are one of the most important organisms that control insects in nature. So they are very important to the balance of ecosystems and agrosystems as well. So of course, if you have a depletion of these animals in the wild, you will have imbalance on these ecosystems. Another thing that's very important, because when we talk about conservation, many of you probably face the same challenge of explaining to people the intrinsic value of the animals, of the plants, of the fungi, of the organisms. So many times we have to talk to people like of the benefits that these animals or plants can bring to human beings. So for example, in the case of spiders, they are realizing that the silk on the webs, they can be used to create new technologies, to create new tools. For example, they are studying the threads of some species, and they found out that it's stronger than Kevlar, lighter than Kevlar, and that can be used in the industry for many other applications. So still, it's a source of bioprospection that people sometimes don't realize that they have a treasure in their hands and they don't know how to deal with that. And of course, again, in the case of tarantulas, people are using them to have the venom and the blood, the hemolymph, to search for new tools or new medicines. For example, they have developed in Brazil, some colleagues, they work with peptides, and they are finding that the peptides inside the blood of some tarantulas can act against many diseases. They are testing for cancer, Alzheimer, and many other stuff. So it's really a source of new medicines to humanity. And just to show you, this is a list of some studies that they were studying the action of the venom of tarantulas, for example, in human cells. So it's very promising. And here I have just to talk a little bit about another side effect of the trade. So many species, they are traded for being pets, for example, and people in another country, they collect this venom and they use to have access to genetic resources or without thinking in benefit sharing with the nations that have that species in the biodiversity. So it's something that people usually don't think of, but it can be a really side effect of the trade. So we need to think about other stuff when we do the regulations and the policies, and people working with genetic resources or biodiversity resources need to think about, okay, maybe it's not nice to take a pet that came from the exotic pet trade and using these without benefit sharing with the countries or with the researchers or with the population that have that genetic resource or that biodiversity resource. So it's just something that I'd like to point it out. And and of course, when we speak about wildlife trade, we have some groups that I know that people think of when we speak about wildlife trade. Of course, we think about rhinos and elephants and birds, and usually people take these animals as the very good example and to develop new policies without thinking in another groups that can have a different type of trade or different type of requirement. So we have here for other groups of organisms that can be traded. And of course, we don't think about them when we read something on newspaper, for example, sea cucumbers or different type of plants, many types of insects, and even fungi, they are traded. And still, little few policies are done thinking about these groups. And of course, we cannot compare the trade of a fungi with the elephant or anything else. So we have to pay attention in these groups and see how they work and how the trade of these organisms work to make conservation actions. And here we have, the spiders are the same, and they have a very interesting situation. We have a wall separating two different groups. In one side, we have the general audience or the policymakers that they have this bias against spiders or not caring about spiders or invertebrates in general. And I participated in this study that was published in this year about the newspaper articles about spiders and spider bites. And we found out that almost half of the articles contained errors and 43% were sensationalistic and spreading misinformation to people. So of course, this seems so silly and so unimportant, but at the end is this that is guiding people to directing efforts to conservation or funding or for research, for conservation or for anything else. So we have this in one side. And in another side, we have people that really love these animals, or they are sometimes even obsessed. You can see this is a place full of spiders, like spiders in terrariums, in cages. And so it's two opposite sides of the audience, and we have to deal at the same time with policymakers not caring about this, and the other side, people really impressed by these animals and wanted to buy it, to have it. And this is a fair in Germany some years ago, just to have an idea how this moves people to travel and to buy and to be inside this culture. And here, just to have a panorama of the protection of these animals. So tarantulas, they belong to a family of spiders called Pterophosidae. And we have nowadays like 156 genera and more than 1,000 species. And they have like a geographic range very restricted, like they cannot be seen like in a continent. The same species, for example, is very rare. And they have a long lifespan. Sometimes you can have the same spider in your house, like in the captivity, for more than 30 years. So it's more than a dog. So you can have and pass to your daughter or to your son, and it's still going on. But despite of this, we have just 39 species in the IUCN Red List, 16 a threatened category, and in CITES, that is this agreement about wildlife trade, the international one and the most important one, we have just 36 species in the Appendix 2, meaning they are regulated, they are not threatened with extinction, but they are regulated to not be because of the commerce. But we know by experience following the market that this commerce is very popular since at least the 70s, and is very popular in the US, in the UK, and in the European Union especially. And here we have the peculiarity that the UK have the oldest ongoing hobbyist society. So it's very popular here. Maybe you have not had contact with this, but I'm sure that it's something happening for a long time. So it's very traditional point of arriving animals here in UK. Well, again, just to tell you a little bit what we know nowadays about the trading arachnids. This is a paper that also was published in this year, and we could, for the first time, to find out a little bit more about what is being traded and the numbers and the origin and everything else. So looking at some important databases related to wildlife trade, like the LEMIS from the US Fish and Wildlife Service and the CITES database, and looking for online websites selling these animals in 9 languages, for example, we realized that it was more than 1,000 species being traded. And here we included like spiders, scorpions, and whip spiders from 66 families, more than 300 genera, and millions of individuals being traded during this 20 years of time span that we analyzed the data. So it's a lot more than maybe we were expecting. Again, just to show you a little bit of the results, we have 78.5% of the species only detected online, so meaning that it was not detected in any formal database. So what is record in CITES and in LEMIS, for example, it's just the tip of the iceberg. So it's a very, very small share of what is happening. But when we look online, like the numbers, they go really up high. So this is very important when we have to study the trade, to look for different sources and see especially what's happening online. And this is an important point because as many other groups, although many times it's clearly illegal, they don't hide, it's in plain sight, they trading these animals because they know that there's nothing to do basically, or probably they will not be charged with any crime or any fee, anything else. So that's something very important. And well, we see that both LEMIS and online forums indicate an increase in the live trade of arachnids, with almost 600 species listed as for sale on one site in 2016. So it's a huge number. And the most traded group regarding arachnids in general is this emperor scorpion. It's found in West Africa, and we have more than 1 million individuals traded in this period, and almost 80% white cock. So this is something very alarming. And as you can see in the maps, many of the species and the specimens are coming from the wild still. So regarding the regulations and everything, they're still coming from the wild. Although in Lemis, for example, the vast majority is for commercial purposes. Almost 92%, more than 4 million of animals were traded during this period. Of course, you can have other things, other purpose that the arachnids are being traded. For example, research is not a commercial purpose, but it's, of course, between collections. You can have this international movement through the borders to do research. But regarding commercial purposes, we can have like ornaments and souvenirs made with arachnids, or it can be traded as food. But this is especially inside the national borders of some countries, not international trade. Of course, you have venom for pharmaceutical industry and research, and for pet trade. But my research now is focused on pet trade, but you have all these other reasons that arachnids are traded. So regarding pet trade, I specialize with tarantulas because of my expertise in taxonomy. And we found out that up to 50% of these species described, known by the science, are in the trade, including 25% of the species described since 2000. So it's a lot. So meaning that half of what we know nowadays about the diversity of tarantulas are already in the trade. And for example, this is a Chilean tarantula. It's very beautiful, like pinkish and metallic. Around 600,000 species of this genus were important, and almost 90% came from the wild, possibly in violation of sanctions. So it's still a high number, and they occur in a small portion of Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. So I saw some pictures of seizures that people took it out of the same population, 200, 300 animals in just one time. So you can imagine the damage on wild populations. And here I take this time to highlight whenever you do wildlife trade research or work with conservation, it's very important to consult a taxonomist, because we are the ones that we are able to see some patterns and trends that maybe people that doesn't know the animals, they don't know about the natural history or the ecology or the taxonomy of these animals, they can see. For example, we were detecting in this study that people were using old names that are not valid to trade animals, because it's a way of, circumvent the law and something. So maybe a person that doesn't know about taxonomy could not spot this type of information when it's dealing with big data sets and so on. So it's very important to always consult a taxonomist. And my current research, and the reason I'm here working with Diogo in ICCS, is to look at the advertisement that we collected some years ago and try to see how the price and abundance in the market are related with some traits. So why people are buying a species in the trade? Like, is it because of the color? Is it because of the size? The rarity, the novelty, what is inspiring or driving people to buy these animals? So we want to see how the price and the abundance changes with these traits. So we are analyzing some advertisements on web stores and collecting these traits to predict the trends and to design conservation action. So basically, it's what we are doing now. And this is just this beautiful picture, or beautiful in my point of view. This little animal is called a Brazilian jewel. It's a very small tarantula. Well, it's big for a spider, but small for a tarantula. Really like 5 centimeters, very colored. I worked with the person that described this new genus, described this species. It's just 5 in the genus, and it occurs in a very restricted area in Brazil. Just to have an idea, we went in an expedition to find these animals for days, and it was impossible to find anything, and it was in the trade. So they have more animals in the trade than in collections. We have, I think, that time when he published this article, it was 40 species in the whole collections in the world. And we have a way more in the trade. So it's something that always bothered me, that how these animals are so unknown and already being traded with basically no regulation and no sustainability and anything else. Well, and another part of what I'm doing and also why I'm here, we are working this survey that I conducted some years ago about people interested in tarantula trade. Doesn't matter if they are hobbyists or they are researchers or policymakers. So it was spread in social media, emails, in 12 languages. And it was 30 questions, multiple choice, open-ended rating questions about conservation, about some behavior, and some other aspects of tarantula conservation. And again, just to illustrate what we found, this is a preliminary study, like I need to explore more this data, but just to have an idea, 62% of the respondents were pet owners, the majority. And of course, we had other people like conservationists, researchers, pet shop owners, breeders, educators. And most of the people that answered the questionnaire, it was in the Palearctic and Nearctic regions. Like, of course, it's always difficult to reach people in different continents, especially in Asia because of the language barrier and so on. But still, we know that the markets, the big markets, are in the US and in the European Union. But when we look at, we filtered the data and we look at the people connected to the hobby, we could see some interesting stuff. For example, we could see that regarding gender, 60% is declared themselves like males. So it's a male stuff apparently to have a tarantula. And when we look at the age, it was a little bit more splitted. 43% it's 18 to 29, and almost 47% from 30 to 49. Anyhow, it's not a hobby for kids or older people. So we have these young adults, especially having these animals. So male young adults. And when we see the educational level of these people, we can see the majority, they have up to high school degree. So elementary school or high school degree. And when they were asked about the years in the hobby, like for how many years they have this hobby, we could see that they are kind of newbies. Almost 0.5% of the respondents, they started this hobby less than 5 years ago. So they are still having this, educating themselves about the hobby. And regarding the number of tarantulas, many people, like most of people has more than one tarantula. So it's not something that, okay, I buy a tarantula, I'm happy, I will have this for the rest of my life, and that's it. No, they have lots of animals at home. You can see that 37% has from 2 to 9, and 24, 10 to 24 species, and lots of people having more than 100, over than 100 at home. So it's more or less, I always joke about, it's more or less like collecting stamps. People are not happy with one, they have to have many, and to exchange and to participate in the community. So this idea of, okay, people just have one, it's not true. And when we look at the source of the species, they are coming from the neotropics, but it's not a surprise since the biodiversity is higher in this area. And also when we look at the place where the people are living, not the nationality, but where they are living, we can see the Palearctic and Arctic regions are where are these people concentrated, that they are living in these countries. So it's where we have to focus the interventions or new policies, like still, of course, there is a bias. It's very difficult to reach other continents and countries, but it's something that we were expecting. And this is an interesting finding. We asked people like if they have another exotic pets at home, apart spiders, and unsurprisingly that they responded that they have also reptiles. This is somehow something that we felt, by experience. Arachnologists usually works with people from the herpetological expertise, with this expertise. So it's very common people to have spiders and snakes, and something that we can explore, for example, about the sentiment drivers in the pet trade. So somehow they are related, maybe they are because they want to impress people with power, with, I don't know, manhood, or look, I'm so, bold because I can hold a spider or a snake in my hands, and that's it. And they also have insects and scorpions. So this is another insight, very interesting, because when we want to develop some interventions, maybe we can have different allies, like people working with reptile trade or insect trade, and so on. And this is the answers about the influence. We asked them who was the main influence when you started the hobby, or why you started the hobby. And we had that the most important influence was regarding online sources, like people answered, like I saw online video, like a YouTube video, or some social media, Instagram picture that I know like impressed me. In the second place, they answered that it was a relative or a friend. And in the third place, a book, magazine, or something that they have read. And this is important to stress that although we have this very important influence of the online media that is, well, influencing everything, everywhere, basically, but we still have this peer influence, like people around say like, oh, you should have a spider, you should buy this or that, you should start a hobby. So it's something that we have to take in consideration again when we design interventions, or when we want to do something to curb illegal and unsustainable trade. When asked about where they buy these new tarantulas, here we can see it was a multiple choice question, so they could answer different, they could fill or assign different answers. So we have the online websites. So online websites from their own country, meaning that they don't need to pass through the borders to have these animals. But different from another type of trades, you still can see the influence of brick and mortar commerce, like pet shops and fair and markets being places where people actually buy new animals. We see for other groups in the trade that online trade is like exploding, but for tarantulas it's very common still people go around the corner and buy a spider there in the shopping, or attend to these big fairs that occur everywhere in Europe and in the US, for example, to buy these animals. And also we asked about what was important when they were planning to buy a new species. It was the color, again, the price, the ease of purchase, to know if the species is legal or illegal. And well, personally, I was expecting something as like the size of the species being something very important, but we found out that actually the gender, the sex and the life stage of the animal, it's very important. So they have preference of females over males, for example, because females tend to live longer. And also they prefer to buy adults than spiderlings. In the second place, we could see color. And in the third place, the ease of purchase. And this is very understandable, especially in the US, when you have like this legislation in each state, and it's very difficult to cross the borders with some products and some animals or organisms. So people prefer to buy locally because it's a little bit of less headache to have the animals. So this is very interesting to guide us to see the trends in the market and everything. And well, also we split it in two different groups, people connected to hobby and researchers, to see if there was some difference between the conservation actions that the both groups think that would be important to do to curb illegal and unsustainable trade. And we found some very interesting stuff. For example, you can see in the first column, it's about curb illegal trade. So just to explain how they did this, it was a rank. They could say, they could assign 1 to something that was not important and 5 something very important. So this was the rank. So, and this is average rank of importance. So hobbyists or people connect to the hobby, they said, in average, like half of the people said that curb illegal trade is something very important. But when you look at for the researchers, it's a way more expressive, the importance that they gave to this action. Another interesting thing, we asked about the bans. If ban the trade, illegal or illegal, could be some solution or some conservation action that they support. And for people in the hobby, they were really against this. So it's something that we have to think when, for example, it's very common to propose some bans sometimes. So we can see there that would be a strong, it could backfire strongly, because people are not keen to comply with that. And again, when we ask the researchers, the percentage, the average rank of importance was very different. Both agreed about protect the natural environment, the habitat of these animals. And when asked about support local breeders, we can see the difference. Of course, people in connected to the hobby, they strongly agree that this is a very important conservation action to support the breeders. And when we see the researchers, the average rank it's lower, 40%. So this is a sign that still we have very different types of thoughts and expectations about conservation, and we need to make some compromises if we want to have something happening. Well, and the goals of this work, this project, is to work with conservation or conservation actions in a different trade. And the supply side of the trade. But as you can imagine, it's very difficult to have these animals seizure in the borders. They don't show in the X-rays. Of course, it's very difficult to find them. They are very easily concealed in luggage or in the body or shoes. Or I already seen once in toys inside, toys and boxes, everything that you can imagine, they can conceal these animals. So it's not a strategy that works very well for these animals. So we have to think in another ways too, to deal with this problem, to address this problem, and work with the demand side of the trade, and with the change of behavior can be a solution. And this is why we conducted a survey to see who are interested, who is interested in buying a tarantula. So now we have to explore more this data, but we have an idea of the profile of people, what they are interested in, what they expect, where they buy the animals, to design a conservation action or intervention and make people change their mind and have the wildlife trade in a more sustainable way. And I want to end this presentation with some points to highlight. So always consult a taxonomist when you do research, because it's very important to have someone that can ID the animals, that can know something about natural history, as I exposed it before. Another thing that's very important is support-based research. It's very difficult to provide evidence for assessments, decision, and policy if you don't have basic research. Arachnids, they suffer with this problem, as many groups. We don't have anything basically about ecology or any other field data, because it's takes a long time. There's no funding, no support. So it's very important to support these researchers, especially in developing countries, to provide evidence for policy and assessments. Also, it's very important to say about this need of enthusiasts and researchers to work together. Around 90% of people said that they care about tarantula conservation, no matter if they have them as pet or they are researchers or policymakers. So we saw a opportunity of working with conservation with everybody. So we have to overcome these differences and work together. And finally, it's necessary a change in policies, especially regarding online trade, make tech companies more liable for illegal wildlife trade. And this is a chance that UK is having now. They are discussing this UK online safety bill, is under debate. So maybe something that UK can lead the way and show people how to deal with this problem. So I think basically this, and I would like to thank you for the patience of listening to me and my broken English about spiders. And thank you to Cone Foundation that sponsored my work for many years. Now I'm without any grant or anything, just working because I really love these animals and I love my job. Pedro Cardoso, the PI of the laboratory that I work in Finland, and all the colleagues that share it, information, photos, experiences, or translated the survey, and of course, Diogo, EJ, and all the ICCS group for having me here. Thank you. I don't know what's this one.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Carol, for a wonderful presentation. So I'll now invite questions from the audience. Yes, please. I think we have a roving mic for those online. And please do, just as a legal notice, that this is being recorded and it's broadcast online.
Yeah, thanks very much. Fascinating talk. Just two things you touched on. Perhaps you could just say a little more about. One is the natural ecology of tarantulas. So, for example, species that are endangered, is that because of collecting or habitat destruction or something else, or does it differ from one species to another? And the second is about breeders that you very briefly mentioned. I wonder, how easy is it to breed these in captivity? And does it differ from one species to another?
Oh, thank you for the questions. So answer the first one. of course, habitat destruction is something very important and relevant. But for example, for the species listed on IUCN, the trade is a threat. So it's something also very important regarding the decreasing of natural populations. Although we still need to do more research about other species, or even with the species that we already know, because it's a long process to do this research, like takes years, and sometimes it's not what people can do because they don't have funding or time or efforts to do, or healthy to do this anymore. But I would say that the number one is habitat destruction, and for some species the trade is it's already determined that can be harmful to wild populations, but for the majority, we don't know yet for sure because of the lack of basic research. And second thing about breeding, difficult. We were discussing this, for many times, and it's very difficult to measure. My personal opinion about this, of course, for some species, people already master this, so you can see a lot in the trade because they already know how to do it. Then because of the behavior, it's easy to do this. But we know for some other species, for example, the one that I show at the Brazilian jewel, that somehow it's very difficult. And of course, because of the price and the rarity, people feel like, okay, I'm not taking the risk of doing the breeding because if I lose the animal, I will lose money. I cannot afford this animal anymore. But we were talking about this difficulty of breeding because somehow it's kind of a fisherman talk. People just brag about, I can do this, I can do that. Oh, look at mine, I did this. But you don't know how reliable this information is. So maybe they are putting this to I don't know, to not say that's white cod because they are, fearing some, intervention or some kind of fee or to lose the animals. So we don't know for sure. Of course, when you talk about these with breeders, you can have an idea of one or two species, but it's very difficult to establish the difficult. You can tell.
That sounds great, yeah. Thank you. Yes, another question at the back, yes.
Hi. So I was wondering, what sort of network exists, the trade network exists from collectors to traders to people, because you mentioned that, in one of the slides, that from the minute you published the article, in a few days it was appearing on the trade, on online trade, on websites and things like that. But it's who's reading the article versus who's collecting, and how organized is this network? Is it quite compared to other networks like Rhinos and Ivory and things like that, or is it more,
Thank you. This is a very interesting question. It seems to not be so organized as other types of trade. For example, ivory trade, you have people in international networks. It seems to be something more local and more individual cells, we have some people that we know, okay, these people used to travel to some countries to take these animals, and they are the responsible for putting the market. So there's no organization in the sense, it seems not to have, but to be very honest, it's something very difficult to track because sometimes we can see name of the people in the forums and in the websites. Say hey, this guy was the one that brought these species from Asia, for example, or from Brazil. Or we can see the records of people arrested because of smuggling animals. But it's very difficult to establish a network. But what we suspect, it's a very simple network from the people collecting some locality. It was very amateur in the sense, okay, the guy reads some paper, okay, they published this new species, they found in Indonesia, I'm buying my ticket, going there, collecting, concealing on my luggage, trying to breed at home, and okay, I will charge, 100 pounds for this, and that's it. So it's very simple in this way. You cannot see this organization or international networks like working together. And sometimes it's so simple that the guy just arrive in the place and tell the kids in the community like, hey, I give you £1 to take a tarantula from that tree. And the kids are like, oh my God, £1, I'm rich, and they just take their animals. And at the end of the day, the guy is like, okay, I have 20 tarantulas. Oh, these I want, these I don't, and that's it. So it's very simple in this way.
Well, I'll go online. There's one question on the primary methods of transportation. So Megan asks, what is the primary method of transporting tarantulas? You mentioned hand smuggling, postal or courier transport important.
If I understood right, what he or she wants to know, it's about how they transport the spiders.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess what we detect is the post office and the courier services like FedEx or UPS or something. They just put inside, sometimes it's called brown boxing, because they put in a very common box saying like, it's a gift for my nephew, and that's it. It goes to the post office because they cannot detect by X-rays or anything else, and it's very difficult to seizure these animals. So I would say that basically it's a very simple, it's not like containers in ships or anything else like other types of trade, but it's very small and local shipments.
Well, Molly.
Thank you. I was wondering, do you ever see specimens in the trade that haven't been described by science, and then what happens then?
Okay, thank you. Well, regarding species that are not recorded by sites, yes, like a lot. I would say the majority is not recorded in sites. Just to remind you that sites just record in the database like species that are under the agreement. So it's 36. We have more than 1,000 described. So you can imagine how many species are not like in sites that are recorded, but they are not in the database.
I think Molly's question was more about scientific description of the species.
Ah, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
No, my bad. Yes, we saw many undescribed species on the trade. We have different situations, but people waiting for the formal description to release these animals in the trade because maybe they can have like a hype and have higher prices. People, for example, I removed a picture that I have from one species that I described with another colleagues. Somehow people knew that we were working the description of these animals, and they were commenting like, hey, we are waiting for them to release the publication to put in the trade. So also this type of situation. And we could see things that we don't know. They are traded under popular names or species under the genus name and plus the name of the color or the place they collected these animals. So there's something new. So the possibilities of having undescribed species is very high in the trade, unfortunately.
Yes.
So when you did your survey with the pet owners of the tarantulas, was there any question included on how aware they are of the illegal trade and everything? Because you're saying now most of them still buy it at like either pet shops or at some fairs, but I'm wondering if they are imported illegally and then they suddenly end up in a pet shop and people go there, do they just ignore the fact that this might be sourced from an illegal source and they're like, oh, I just really want that spider, so I don't care about the history of it? Or do they think that when they go to a normal pet shop on the street that those are sustainably sourced spiders or something, and or maybe they come from a breeder and they just really don't know that they were imported in a shoebox or something?
I thank you for the question. It's very important because we asked specifically about that, and we had two questions. One, it was if people were aware of the legislation in the country, if they knew, and half of the respondents, they partially knew about the legal scope of the trade. So basically, they cannot say that they are unaware of what they are doing somehow, so they have a good idea. And we also asked them about if they think about the legality, and when they buy a new tarantula, if they think that the people just look specifically for a white cog animal, or they buy it by chance. And people were divided. They say like, okay, I think most of the illegal animals, they are purchased because people don't know, is unexpected. Another part of the respondents say that maybe, we are not sure, and other parts say, yeah, I think people really want white cog and they go for it because of many reasons. But mainly, I would say, if I remember right, 40%, they are not sure about the legality, but still they keep buying. And it's very difficult to have the permits and check the legality of these, like having all the papers.
Well, I'll take a question online on the motivations for keeping tarantulas. So did you look at that in your survey? Is it sort of an image? Is it interest, in the biology of the species or whatever it might be? Is it companionship? Is that a pet animal? Did you look into that?
Yeah, this is the next step that I hope to do when I have funding, yay. It's look for this kind of sentiment, why people were buying. So I guess the fact that the people has reptiles with spiders is something that can direct, like maybe is this sensation of power, of, impress people or being different and have this group of people that are different with you, and belonging to a community. So I think this, it's something that we can explore more, but it's the next step and need to be looked deeper.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for such an interesting talk. So I was wondering more about the legality of these species. So you said they are in CITES Appendix 2, but none of them are in Appendix 1, right? And so in different countries, does the legality also cover them in their highest protection schedules? Because then because if that is the case, then that means that they once they cross the border, then they become legal trade. So is that something that happens in spider trade?
Yes, definitely. I think you touched on a very important point. As a Brazilian, I can talk a little bit about my country. So it's illegal to collect, transport, sell, trade any species from the biodiversity, but still something that, I would say that 100 species, Brazilian species are in the trade, for example. So yes, this is a problem because once it crosses the borders and, for example, enter in the European Union, it's laundered. So it's kind of a legal animal. For example, the US market, it's more restrict about the legislation, that they take care more, they have good records. So once it crosses, let's say, Brazil, European Union, and go to US, it enters in the US like a legal animal, like not problematic animal. So this is something that we have to curb, and it's very, of course, difficult to track all these and to, stop at any point and say, where's the permits and what to do. So it's a very complex problem to deal with.
Wonderful. I'll take one more online question only. We're running out of time, unfortunately, but Carol will be around for a few minutes afterwards if you want to ask any additional questions. And last question, you talked about future plans when it comes to understanding consumers. Question from Jenny Miller online. What conservation interventions do you think could be put in place based on your findings?
Okay, nice. I would say that the most relevant thing is to work with the demand side, to look for the first time to people that interested in having spiders and work with them, instead of course, policy, its enforcement is very important and necessary, but to look at the people and to overcome the difference between what researchers used to think and what they think it's very important. It's one of the reasons that's why I'm here with Diogo, because he has this expertise and knows how to work with this. So I guess he's the key person to start to do more concrete stuff in that direction.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Carol. Before we adjourn, I just wanted to put a plug in for the next event, 26th of October, by Professor Oliver Phillips, who will be presenting on tropical forests to 2050, science challenges for researchers and policymakers. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.